They say a man's greatest enemy is not the devil. It is that small voice inside him that keeps whispering, just one more time. This is the story of a man who gambled everything: his money, his wife, his friends, his own blood, until there was nothing left except the breath inside his lungs. But what if I tell you, even that, he was ready to bet it too? Before we go deeper into Adamu's story, let me tell you something. This may be a folk tale, but the truth inside it is real. Many people are living this same life today, making dangerous choices, chasing luck, and losing everything. Some gamble with money, some with love, some with their own future. And just like Adamu, they don't see the trap until it's too late. If this story makes you think, don't keep it to yourself. Share it so others can learn. And if you love deep, powerful stories like this, hit that subscribe button. Because what you're about to hear will change the way you see life forever. In the dry lands of Garinruga, when people hear the name Adamu, they spit 3 times on the ground. Not because he was a killer, not because he was a thief, but because Adamu was the kind of man who would bet his own shadow if someone asked him. His wife, Sewa, a woman whose tears had long dried. His son, Farouk, a small boy who thought every man in the village was his father, because Adamu had borrowed from every single man in the village. They said Adamu's blood was not red. It was the color of greed. But there's something they didn't know. Adamu was not born a gambler. He was made. It all started the day he placed his first bet at the village wrestling match. He won. That single win was what destroyed his life. Sometimes, the worst curse a man can ever have is a little bit of luck. One Harmattan evening, Adamu's debt had piled up like sand dunes. He owed the butcher, the tailor, the fisherman, even the blind beggar at the village square. Nobody wanted to lend him money again, except one man, Malam Musa, a man who smelled like secrets. Malam Musa had only one condition: I will forgive all your debts if you can bring me something. Adamu's greedy heart jumped. What is it? Malam Musa's lips curled into a smile that could freeze the sun. Honey, Adamu laughed. Honey, is that all? Malam Musa's smile grew wider. Not ordinary honey, Guba honey. Adamu's smile disappeared immediately. Guba honey was not from ordinary bees. It was from the Dutse Magia Hills, a place where even death feared to walk. They say the bees there were not like other bees. They were older than the village itself. Their sting could paralyze a man's soul, and their honey, 1 spoon could make a man rich forever. Adamu had only 2 options: find the honey, or let his debts bury him alive. At midnight, Adamu carried an empty calabash and walked into the hills. The night was so silent, you could hear your own heart whispering to your ribs. When he reached the beehives, the honey dripped slowly like melted gold. Adamu stretched his hand, carefully, quietly. He filled half of the calabash. He was about to leave when he heard something behind him. Not footsteps, not wind. A soft humming sound, like thousands of tiny voices singing inside the darkness. He turned slowly, and what he saw chilled his soul to ice. The beehive was moving, not from the bees inside it, but from the shadows watching him from the trees. Nobody told Adamu that the Guba bees could see at night. Adamu ran like a mad dog, but before he reached the village, he had already been stung 17 times. That night, he couldn't sleep. The buzzing never left his ears. But when he opened the calabash the next morning, The honey was still there, thick, golden, waiting. Adamu smiled. He thought he had won. What he didn't know was, the bees never sting you once. They sting you forever. From that night onward, Adamu's life began to change. He could hear buzzing inside his head. Even when the whole village was silent, he would wake up at night scratching his own skin as if something was crawling beneath it. He thought it was all in his head, until one night his wife woke up and saw thousands of tiny bite marks on his back. The bees were inside him. Malam Musa finally came to collect his honey. But Adamu's debt was never about money. It was about life. 1 jar of guba honey for 1 soul. Adamu thought he could trick the bees, but you cannot cheat a curse that lives inside your own blood. What nobody knew was this: Malam Musa was not just an ordinary man. He was the king of the guba bees, a spirit cursed to walk among men, collecting souls through gambling. Every gambler in the village was a servant of the hive, without even knowing. Adamu was not just playing with luck. He was playing against something older than time itself. Adamu finally returned to the hills, not to steal honey, but to beg for mercy. Nobody knows what happened that night. All they found the next morning was the calabash filled with honey. But they say if you go to the hills at night, you will still hear Adamu's voice, calling for one more bet. Moral of the story: not all debts are paid with money. Some debts are paid with the pieces of your own soul.